Hello guys, welcome back to another episode here on African Confessions. There is a message that I want to share with you guys, and this message, it was forwarded to me by one of our admins. The message reads like this: Dear brother, how are you? I have my own painful story that I want to share with the rest of the world. One day, I came back from work, and as I walked into the house, I saw my two girls. When I saw them, they were just laying dead in a pool of blood. But when I saw my two girls lying dead in a pool of blood, I then chose to be in denial mode because I rushed to where they were. I had totally lost my mind, and I kept on screaming because in my mind I had chosen that no, my children could not die in such a way. I threw my bag on the floor, then I rushed into the hallway. I will never forget that sight. And even though it has been more than 8 years, but yet that picture is still stuck in my mind. I screamed for help, and all that I wanted was to quickly rush my kids to the hospital. But before I could take even my phone from the bag, it was when I felt a very strong grip, and I knew that who had taken hold of my hand, because the person who was standing right there behind me, he was really familiar. This was my husband's hand, and as I turned my head to look at him right into his face, he then took a knife, and I felt it cold right into my body. Why? Of all the people, why was he doing such an act? Why had he decided to kill our two girls in cold-blooded murder? I was certain that this man, he was so possessed because you could not even look at his eyes twice. There was this other demonic possession that was all over his face. He was not speaking with me as such, but the way that he was groaning, it seems as if deep down in his heart, he knew that all the things that he was doing, they were not okay. This was a crime that he was committing, but it seemed as if my husband had lost control over his body. Even when he stabbed me, I saw him trying to control his hand, but unfortunately, I saw that he had lost control. Then he started stabbing me. When he started stabbing me, when I had fallen to the ground, and when I looked at him when he was walking to the place where I had fallen down, I knew that if I was not going to rise up from the ground where I had fallen, this man, he was prepared to kill me. I looked at my kids, and I knew that I had to fight because I was in denial mode. So at the back of my mind, I told myself that if I can rise up and fight with him, then I will rush with my kids to the hospital. So I stood up. I had blood everywhere. The first place where he had stabbed me was my right arm. It was really painful, and blood was just flowing from my arm. It was like a tap that was open because blood was just pouring out of my arm. But I rose up and I tried to fight back, but he didn't make it easy for me. The first few seconds, he stabbed me, I think 6 times, but I want to thank God that each and every place that he was stabbing me, he was missing my vital veins. That is how I survived. He kept on stabbing me, and the reason why I am writing this, it is because of God. There was no way I could have survived this if it was not for God. My husband was someone who was well built, and I knew that even though I was trying to fight with him, but there was no way I could overpower him. I had a lot of questions because I had left home in the morning, and I had asked him to picture the girls from school. The day had been going on very well. Now I had found my kids sleeping in cold blood, and I was next with blood coming out of everywhere. You know, if you are stabbed with a knife, the first time you will scream, but the second time when someone stabs you again, I think that your body will react in another different way. Because I stopped crying, I knew that this was now a matter of life and death. How I collapsed, I don't know, but I think that it was because I had lost so much blood. The next thing is that people found me, they said that they just found me and my girls, we were just lying there in a pool of blood. I think that my husband, after he had stabbed me, because when we went to the hospital, they said that I was stabbed 13 times. I don't know why he chose to stab me 13 times, but after he had stabbed me 13 times, he then wrote number 13 in that pool of blood. He then left and rushed outside of our home. My neighbors had heard me screaming the first time, and the ones that were quickly rushed, they found him gone, and they took me to the hospital. And as the forensic team arrived, they declared my two girls that they had died on the spot. I was rushed to the hospital. This was like the most painful journey that I had ever taken in my life, because whilst I was in the ambulance, those guys, the paramedics, they were trying as much as they could to save my life, but I kept on whispering to them that, please do not save me, just let me die, because I had heard that my kids, they had been declared dead on the spot. So this was really difficult for me. A week later, I was out of the hospital and they could not even bury my kids because my family had decided to wait for me until I had recovered. I had forgotten about my kids when I was still in hospital. This is what the human mind will do when it is in survival mode, because I don't know how I just managed to forget about my kids. Maybe it was because I was in denial. I kept on thinking that as soon as I would walk out of the hospital, I would find my kids waiting for me so that we can go back home. I had never been this heartbroken in my life, and only to find out that the father of my children, he had spoken with his brother on WhatsApp. As they were talking on WhatsApp, then his brother, my brother-in-law, then informed the police. And after that, the police told my brother-in-law to ask my husband to send him a GPS location. And this is what my husband did. Yes, he sent a GPS location, but when they arrived at the place, they found out that he had hanged himself. Brother, he had killed himself. I don't know how many times that he had tried to stab himself, and when he saw that he was not dying, that is when he took a rope. This was the most painful thing that had ever happened to me. Even now, brother, I don't know how to even come to terms with all of these things that happened in my life. I have a lot of questions on why did my husband ever choose to kill our two innocent girls, and also why did he choose to kill himself, and yet God decided to save me. And when I think of our life, we were just a middle class family. We really had a normal life. You would go to work, come back and fetch the kids. Sometimes if I was going to knock off late, when I would have arrived back home, I would find out that my husband and our kids would have prepared supper so that we can eat. Our romantic life, I can say that it was okay, even though we were busy people, but here and there we made sure that we had to enjoy our life. Me and him, we used to go out for dinner, and I thought that this was like the most perfect marriage. And amongst us, there was no incident of cheating. So even up until today, I keep on asking myself a lot of questions, because one of his relatives then suggested that maybe there was someone who was blackmailing him. This was just suspicion with no evidence. I don't know if they know any other details, but they just said that these were just suspicions that maybe he had fallen in love with another man's wife, or maybe he had done something bad at work. So that is why he had decided to end his family. So after he had stabbed me about 13 times, he thought that I was dead because I had collapsed back to the floor. That is when he rushed out of the house so that he can end up killing himself. One thing that I know is that my husband, he had bipolar. But why did he chose to do this? Because as far as I knew, he was regularly taking his medication, and I made sure that indeed he take his medication, even though I am thankful to God for his protection. But whenever I think of my kids, I feel so much pain. The prayer that I keep on praying to God is that, why, God, did you choose to save me and not to save my kids? At least if you had chosen my kids, then I would have died in their place. At least it will be better, because when they died, they were full of life and they were still very young. I know that one day I will meet my kids when Jesus comes. I try to do what is right, so when he comes, I'll be in the resurrection morning. I wish to meet Jesus and ask him all the questions. Dear listeners, right there was a message that was forwarded to me. It came from one of our listeners. If you have any story, no matter how painful it might be, that you want to share with us, please do not hesitate to contact us via our email address. Let us speak with our dear sister in the comment section.